We did read chapter 7 and 8, I hope, this week. Chapter 7 was It's About the Future. This was when he was trying to become the CEO by using the campaign of It's About the Future. He decided on 3 priorities. The first interview wasn't very friendly with the interviewers, the board, I guess. And he was and he had the gurgling tummy, which I thought was a funny moment in the book. He told them that Disney needed a more streamlined process for making decisions, and it was a 6-month process that was very trying. He interviewed 15 times for the job, which I also thought that was telling because that's quite a lot of times to interview for anything, let alone the same job. He definitely had that chest pains at the Clippers game, which just kind of let him know like this is a little too much stress, and hopefully helped him to calm down on that. The whole process did teach him tenacity and to try to control only what he could, which is a good lesson for all of us, especially right now. The board convened a vote, and spoiler alert, he won, and he was the candidate that was the CEO. He then, and then this is important too, after the 15 interviews and the 6-month process, he took some time to breathe and called everybody to tell everybody. So just took some time to absorb it. And let's see, my favorite quote for this one was, "You must think, plan, and act like an insurgent." I think that's important because sometimes we need to remember that we got to change up things when they need to be changed up, and we can't be sort of like the orange cord that Ted likes to talk about. Can't be keeping the business the same always. So when we talked about priorities, I remembered that when I first joined the management team, I went to Teresa and I asked her, I said, what are the most important things for you within this business, what we need to get done? And then those were 3 of the things that I kind of set myself toward goals of making sure to work for my own self. So I really thought it's a really good way to operate for yourself, is to find out what the priorities should be and then go ahead and set them. And like he said, 3 is a really good number. You don't want to go with, I have 17 priorities. Well, you have no priorities because you don't have any, you're just listing off things you want to do, but 3 priorities is a good amount. So, it's a good way to build your own career and your own, or just for your personal growth as well. Chapter 8 was called The Power of Respect. He just had to get right on the job when he got the job. There was no like honeymoon period. He had to end the fight with Roy, end the fight with Pixar, and change the way they make decisions and how they worked. They had to just basically call Roy and say, hey, would you like a spot on the board? It's like an honorary spot. And basically that satisfied him. He just wanted some respect, and that was important to, remember that everybody wants respect, and sometimes just giving people respect can be something that really can solve your problems. I found that to be true in every aspect of my life, especially within Disney, is people, you generally just want respect. And it was the easiest and cheapest way to solve a problem. I thought that was an interesting way to think about it. They talked about and then Steve Jobs and Bob Iger got together when he won in the fight with Pixar and talked about the iPod video long before it was a thing. And I thought it was kind of interesting that they had the same idea at the same time. And then Iger agreed for Disney to be a content partner. And then they remade strat planning, which we kind of talked about a little bit last week, but made strat planning into less of a powerhouse and more of a, hey, help me get some information for decisions, but he would in the end be the one making the decision, which streamlined the company a little bit. The biggest lesson I took from this chapter, I wrote down 3 things: respect, respect, and respect. That's the most important thing we can get out of that. Remember to be respectful to everybody. Favorite quote was, don't let your ego get in the way of making the best possible decision. I can't tell you how true that is. Egos can be the destroyer of all things. Yeah, just talking about the iPod video and how it was a disruptor for the industry. Before that, we had VHSs, DVDs, and now we don't. I have DVDs and VHSs, but I bought them 10 years ago. I now use everything's Netflix and Disney, Disney Plus and all that stuff. It was a disruptor, but it's also a way to move forward with your business. So, be always looking for those disruptors and remember that there are also opportunities. That was a lot of talking, and I apologize for it, but we're going to move. Vans did join us, so we're going to have Vanessa, you'll start. She joined and then left, I think. Oh, I don't know if she's back. Okay, we'll start with the other Vanessa at this point, Vanessa Dominguez.
Okay, so I wrote down a couple quotes, and one of them was the one on page 120. Little respect goes a long way, and the absence of it is often very costly. I lost my headset. I liked that, what he had said, just because in showing everything that had happened with the company, like if that makes a huge difference. And I think that it led to a good start when he became CEO. And then I took from the passage when he was discussing just how everyone was criticizing, sorry guys, I keep losing my headphone. When he was being criticized just by the public and everything, and saying that he wasn't gonna, he's not good for the job, or he shouldn't get the job. And he actually had that meetup with Jeffrey Katzenberg. And he was even telling him, like, you're not gonna get this job. And he said something. He said, it's easy to get caught up in rumor mills, and letting someone's perception of you can make you defensive and petty. And I thought that was a good lesson too, and that we just have to take a step back, and we have to kind of realize that, that it's just, sorry, I lost my wording. That was a good way to look at it, and that he had maintained that. And even though he was getting so overwhelmed by what people were saying, and he had the anxiety attack, like he still was very composed. And even at the interview, he might have blown up, but it was 15 interviews, and that was quite a bit. I have other stuff, but I can't think of it, so I'll move on.
Yeah, I thought that part about the 15 interviews was just, oh my gosh. Vanessa Alatar, we'll go to you next.
Hey, sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. Let's see. There we go. Hi. So I don't know what you guys have talked about so far, but the biggest takeaway for me had to do a lot with his relationships, with maintaining relationships, building relationships, and reestablishing broken relationships. And that really resonated with me, because I've been in a place where I've had really bad relationships, and I've had to go back and mend those bridges with other people. And he said something to the effect of, like, not letting your ego get in the way. And that was something that I really had to work hard to do, because ultimately it's not about me, it's for what's best for everybody and the company at large. Something else that I made note of that I am still working on was a quote from chapter 8, where he said, if you approach and engage people with respect and empathy, the seemingly impossible can become real. Not that I'm not engaged or respectful or empathetic, but sometimes it doesn't always come across, especially the empathy portion of that. So that's something that I'm still working on. And please, in the future, feel free to let me know, pull me aside if you see that I'm maybe being a little too crass. But that's all I've got.
Thank you so much. And I will tell you, don't worry.
Oh, I'm sure you will.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a little message from Natalie. She wanted to be here as well, but she can't come. She works in Huntington Beach, where things are different and crazy with the situation we're having right now. So she wanted to for me to express that she wanted to come. Next, I'm going to go ahead and pick Tamara.
Mute me. Hi. So yeah, along with what Patrick has talked about, one of the things that just blew my mind in learning about this is what he went through to get this job and how he had to overcome so many bad perceptions. He was being painted with the brush of Michael Eisner when he should be looking at what has Bob done. And I relate that to how our little micro world is sometimes, is we'll look at potential leaders, and I know that I have in the past looked at, okay, well, who's their circle of friends? Who are their influencers? And maybe not give them the right chance because of who their circle is. And it made me stop and think, okay, that's not really appropriate, because everybody should be able to stand on their own 2 feet. So that piece kind of resonated with me. Katzenberg is an ass. Just saying that out loud. And I loved how the person who on his strategy, when Bob was rattling ideas on, okay, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this. He's like, whoa, you've got too many, you've already failed. How many times do we do that when we start our day? We make this big, huge, long list of everything we have to get done in the day, and then we feel kind of bad when we may not get to everything. So I really like the idea of the prioritizing. Pick your top 3 things you're going to get done for the day. Anything else is a bonus, but you focus on your top 3. So I think that was my biggest takeaway of how to become a better and more effective leader. But to Vanessa's point, not letting your ego get in your way, because it isn't about me. It's about what can we do to make sure our guests are having the best experience, our cast are having the best experience, and filtering through that. Now, when I make decisions, is it my ego? Am I going to fall on my sword for my ego? Or am I really going to take a step back and look at it and go, all right, what do I need to do to move us forward? So that was kind of my takeaway for that. And I loved how when he went and met with Steve Jobs, and Steve's response to him being called to say, okay, I got the job as CEO, was like, meh, that's nice. We'll see where that goes. And how Bob really took his top 3 things of devoting time to creating brand content and making it very specific. 2, embracing the technology. And 3, becoming a global company. And you look at how he's taken us on this journey. Those weren't just words. He made those all happen. And we get to be so proud to work for this company now because of his drive to adhere to those 3 standards. So that was my takeaway for these last 2 chapters.
Yeah, I can't tell you the priorities, just that I really, and the ego too. I mean, all those points are good. I love them all. Let's see. Do we still have Doug here? Yes, we do. Doug, did you get a chance to read it? You want to pitch in?
Yeah, okay. So because Patrick doesn't put it in bold enough to do what chapters we're supposed to do, I did chapters 6 and 5 or 6 and 7 instead of 7 and 8. But anyway, if the book first came out, I got it on Audible, so I've listened to the whole thing. But I also went and bought it on Kindle so that I could read it. And one of the things back in chapter 6 that really struck out to me happened to be about optimism that he was talking about. And I'm sorry you guys have to listen to this for a few minutes, but the passage that got me was, as a leader, you can't communicate that pessimism to the people around you. It's ruinous to morale. It saps energy and inspiration, and decisions get made from a protective defensive posture. Optimism in a leader, especially in challenging times, is so vital. And it just made me think about some of our cast members that we deal with, our enchanting ones, how sometimes they're a lot very pessimistic, and we need to, well, I need to figure out a way, because they talk, even to this day, they still message me and talk to me, and it's always seems to be negative, and I need to start learning a way to try and bring the positive out in them. So that was about chapter 6. Chapter 7, when I got out of it, was something that I've come to learn a lot in my life, and that has to do with our heart and our head. I've come to believe that our heart and our head are two different entities. Our head will always be the one that's going to be logical, and well, also, if we just use it by itself and make decisions from that, it's going to be our downfall. Our heart is where our feeling is, and one of the things, I'm going to use a Star Trek reference. My favorite character is Spock, and how logical he is. But he also reminds me of how things can always go wrong in our relationships with people because we don't have feeling. And that's part of why we need to use both when we're making decisions about our future, about what's going on, about the people around us, and not just use our head to make those decisions. I didn't read chapter 8 yet, so I've listened to it, but I haven't read it. So.
Well, that's okay. I appreciate any time Spock gets brought up in a conversation. So.
Well, so what made me think about it was how when he found out that he got the position of CEO, how he depended, or how he was so thankful to Willow at the time, who always believed in him and kept reminding him that that was not the most important thing in his life. And I think that was very important to remember, because this isn't the most important thing in our lives. Our family, our health, and ourselves are the most important things in our life. And that's what I feel. The job, while it's fun and it's challenging and it has its good and bad times, there's always another one out there.
Yeah, I know. I think what surprised me a lot when I went in for the management stuff is everybody kept saying, well, how do you feel about the job? Like, why do you want to do it? And like, it was very touchy feeling more than like the very like logical steps. I think that Disney definitely encourages that part of it. They, use your heart as well as your brain. I hope we do anyway. Jeanette, do you want to share with us? I know you're on your iPad there.
Yeah. So, I mean, everything you guys have said is good, so I don't want to repeat everything, but the 15 interviews is eye-opening, but I think what my takeaway from it a little bit was that it's a good lesson for all of us in not judging someone before we know them and what they're made of, and not by their alignment to people. We tend to do that. Oh, well, they're with that person, but and a lot of times we also tend to want to go find out about a person before if we don't know them and they're going to interview with us or they're going to come talk to us about something, rather than have our own journey with them, because it might be different than someone else's journey with them. And that to me was kind of important. And I think this is important too. I liked how he was very much focused on not saying anything negative about what Michael had done with the company, and made it about himself. So that, because he did work with him and he was part of that, and people tend to want to hear all the dirt and the juiciness and what did you want to do different, rather than just make it about him and what he was going to do. I think that was kind of a really important message to everyone, that what is our plan? What are we going to do? Not at the expense of another person, regardless of what had happened. I think that was kind of important. And I really do like, throughout the whole book from the beginning to now, how he approaches relationships and how he makes that person feel important, regardless of what he thinks about them. He makes them a priority and makes them the important person. And the empathetic part of it, it's hard to be empathetic a lot, but you can be empathetic without being sympathetic and digging into someone's situation, but trying to help them help themselves. But I do like how he approaches relationships and how he builds that relationship before he starts with what he wants to do, and doesn't jump feet first. That's, a lot of good quotes, a lot of good stuff, but that's really what I took away from it.
I gotta tell you, Jeanette, you're a quote machine too. Empathetic without sympathetic. I appreciate that one. That's a good one.
It's true. You can be kind without being nice.
Haley, we'll go to you next.
Oh, cool. Thanks for unmuting me. So there were a lot of good things that everyone said. One thing that I took away was at the beginning of chapter 7, when he discussed the future and said, I can't do anything about the past. We can talk about lessons learned and we can make sure we apply those lessons going forward, but we don't get any do-overs. And I think that point, it kind of stuck with, it stuck with me, because I've had instances, whether it's, my personal life, work, it's usually school, where I wish I could go back and do something different so there would be a different outcome. But I've had to learn that you don't get that. So I'm just trying to take all of those lessons that I've learned from different things and just keep moving forward with it. And there was another part in chapter 8 that I just found funny. It was when they were discussing the pricing of Hong Kong for tickets. And Peter was asking about what, saying like, oh, we're not sure that that team's doing the right thing. And Bob Iger said, if they can't figure out what pricing should be, they shouldn't be in their jobs. But if we believe that they should be in their jobs, then they should be in charge of pricing. I just thought it was funny, a little humorous, that's all. So.
No, I love that. I think that was so cool to give the power back to the people that should be making the decisions. Poor strat planning. We kind of talked about on them last time too, but I think planning things out too much probably didn't help us somewhat. Thank you, Haley. Jessica, I still have you on here? Yes, I do. There you are.
Yep. Okay, so just quick recap of the signs we've learned. We've learned help, restroom or bathroom, where, and then the I love you and the kind of meaning behind that sign. And so we talked last week about how to give directions. And when you're giving directions, you do it from your perspective, not the other person's perspective. So it's as if you're walking through it is how you give the directions. So say, trying to tell people where the carousel is from Castle Holiday Shop. I just tell them to go outside of the store and turn right. So you do the letters. So the R is for right, and then an L is for left. And then you move it the direction that they're going. So this is like your little person. So they're walking out of the store and then you go right. You don't have to switch it to an R. You can just do that. There's a lot of debate in the deaf community about initialized signs, which is where you use the letter for the sign. So there's been talk about switching that out and changing those signs. I'm not as brushed up on that debate as I should be. So you could just move your finger or you could do that. But when you're pointing in the deaf community, we use your pointer finger. I know we have our Disney point, but you use your pointer because this is a U. So this is, you're pointing. This means you in sign language. So that's just a little bit on directions. So it's up to you. You could do the L and the R, you could just kind of point, but you do it from your perspective. And then remember to keep thinking about signs and things you want so that we can keep learning together. So in regards to the book, in chapter 7, everyone made really great points, and I liked the idea of remembering that it is just a job, and our lives and our health are very important, and we need to put those first. Especially with his anxiety attack, he thought he was totally fine with stress, he could handle it, and that was just a big eye-opening experience for him. And it's good for us to remember that now instead of when we're in that position having an anxiety attack, because we didn't realize that we bit off more than we could chew. So just remembering that the job shouldn't be the most important thing in your life, that we need to keep other things in mind as well. So I don't want to repeat what other people said. Everyone hit everything that I thought that stood out to me. And then chapter 8, in my personal life and my educational journey, I really have focused on data. Data and research make me happy. Weird, I know. But in my brain, I always want to know what the data says and what the research says. And so a lot of that was kind of taking that out of it. And I liked this quote, it really stuck out to me. No matter how much data you've been given, it's still ultimately a risk. And the decision to take that risk or not comes down to one person's instinct. So to remind myself that instinct is really important, and data and research is also important, but it shouldn't be the driving factor. And sometimes you got to take that leap of faith and just go for it. And your instinct is probably correct. But yeah, I come from that background of being like, hey, let's do some research. Let's figure it out. What's the best idea? And sometimes you just kind of got to go for it and then collect the data afterwards and be like, okay, next time, maybe we should do it a different way. Maybe that research showed us that wasn't the best approach, but at least you did something instead of waiting for all the information to come in. So those were kind of the big things that stood out to me.
No, thank you so much for that. I believe, is that Ted that doesn't have the video on the 714 number? Let's see, I'll unmute it.
I wrote my notes.
Okay, got
Hey,
you.
sorry, hey guys, I'm sorry. I wrote my notes on the same phone, so that's my bad. But hey guys, you've all said it right, and I just want to just go back to what I want to tag on to what Jeanette had mentioned about, I guess, well, the biggest lesson to me before I go there is kind of how he went through and his learning through this whole interview process. And even to the point of, when he was challenged by the board member, and, trying to drum up some drama between him and Michael. And he said, you know what? And he just laid it on the line, and he felt very justified. And of course, that was a big lesson for him. But at the same time, he stood to his ground. And I really thought that was the turning point, that he either convinced the board that, he's going to be his own thinker. He's not going to be manipulated by anyone. And then that's what leads me to the kind of his, I wrote what the biggest lesson was, was through his interview. And his lessons, or his hard lessons, were about one thing that I did was that, that he needed to stay clear of his anger and anxiety, to keep the blows and his ego away from his mind, just to keep it out, because there's just no room. Once that gets in your mind, then your decision making is all messed up. And that was a good thing to see from him. And the other thing that he mentioned too is that it's easy to be optimistic when everyone is telling you that you're good, but it's much harder when especially when they're not, and then everyone else knows. And that's huge in our culture, where I take a step back a lot, and I usually will go back to my leader or my peer or to the leads or to the cast, and I ask those questions, because if I don't feel good about it, I'm sure they don't feel good about it. So that's really important to understand all different points of view. The other thing that I wrote in here is let's see, I'm losing my notes here. I'm sorry about that. I had to recognize. One of the big, let me see, I'm gonna go back. The favorite quotes, I have two of them, is don't let your ego get in the way of making the best possible decision. That was huge. And my second one, which is even better, is if you approach and engage people with respect and empathy, the seemingly impossible will become real. And that was like huge, especially when he knew right away he had three things that he had to address. He had to figure out how to get Roy back in, and and how he was going to make that happen. And he just went for it. He just called Roy. He met with Roy and did what he needed to do. And he was he was honest. He was direct, and he went and he did everything he could to give Roy that sense of the respect and the empathy. And that paid. It was nothing. It was cheap. It was zero. And even though all his other folks were telling him why, and that's ridiculous, because that's where the egos get in. The other thing was when he did the same thing with trying to acquire Pixar, or trying to lay the foundation, with our Apple guy. And when he went in there and knowing how Steve Jobs had such a big ego, but he didn't want to lay into the ego, but he was just trying to understand him. And then I think Patrick, you had mentioned in the beginning about how he was showing him, his latest, and Bob just jumped right on it. He made his own decision then and there. He didn't have to go through all these people that Michael would have done, or maybe that was the decision through the strat team and so forth. He did it because he knew that was the right thing to do. And, look, now we own, Pixar because of those development. And then the last one was trying to get through how to give the team their own minds back so they can make their own decisions, and eliminating the 60 plus, people that ran the strategy department down into, I think it was a dozen, and giving it back to the teams, and letting them make the decisions. So that not only built back the payback that was huge, because the cast now built, they're building up their trust and their love for the company, and they're going to work harder, and because their voices are going to be heard. So that was huge. The last thing was, I see the parallels, within my leadership within reading, these two chapters, and it goes back to if you approach and engage people with respect, empathy, and seemingly impossible, the seemingly impossible will become real. And that's so true. And I go through a lot in my head, and a lot of the stuff that I worked with over almost the last 40 years, being in business, in retail, and working at different companies. And of course, this Disney being the creme de la creme, and really seeing how to navigate through all this. I find it's so true. And as simple as our individuals, our cast, that sometimes they're a little bit harder to manage, and sometimes we have to spend a little bit more time with them. And I know we have that other thought is, don't spend too much time with them because they're going to, there's other people that deserve your time. But I think at the initial part, and who those cast members are, and they're continuously, their attendance and their performance, and over again. But once you get there and you start that foundation where you show them a little bit of respect and a little bit of empathy, then you start the documentation, and then they can't turn anywhere, because now they know it's them. So either A, they have the opportunity to change, or B, they'll continue this game until it catches up and they go away, or something will slip, they'll get caught for theft or whatever they normally do, and they're going to go away. Or three, you turn them around, which is probably the hardest thing to do in our jobs. But at least everyone's on the same paper, or on the same page, and they know that that this is how you're going to perform. So they can't turn around and say you don't like them, or you're trying to get against them, because everything is there already. It's all been documented. Does it work all the time? No. Do you get the support from your peers and maybe not sometimes from your leaders? It all depends. The one thing that I did learn is just the patience, and continue to do that, because it has worked for me in a lot of different cases. And at least it shows me that I put the monkey back on their back with their accountabilities. And that's it. That's all I have on this one. But thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ted. Yes, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, right, Doug?
Yeah. Yes.
Now that one's also for Vans, because I know she's a big Star Trek fan. Judy, we're gonna go with you next.
So I found it very interesting, all that he had to do to basically interview for the position. And like all of you, like I thought 15 interviews, that's very excessive. And after I listened to that chapter, I started thinking, was this the intention of the board to ensure that he was the right person for the role? Or were they testing his temperament, as he mentioned? Because he felt like he had a good temperament, but of course, after the 15th interview, after the same question being asked of how do you feel Michael Eisner did in his role when he was in that position, and he kind of finally lost his cool. He was like, you've asked me that question, how do you want me to answer? It did, when I read about that, when I had listened to it, that was my thought, like what do they want to get out of Bob? Like, are they looking for the smallest thing to give a reason that he's not for that role? And I do think that's the case a little bit. And then towards the end of that chapter, he mentions himself where he thought, oh God, I lost my train of thought, where he was thinking about the role of CEO. Like he was internalizing, he was going through it and how he felt. He was like, and he thought, I don't feel I deserve the job. I feel I'm the best person for that role. And I'm thinking the board was thinking the same thing, but we're more negative about it, trying to challenge him and trying to maybe encourage him to, let his ego get in the way so that they can prove why Bob wasn't for that role. When, again, he analyzed and thought about it, and he's like, I don't feel I deserve that role. It's not mine to have, but I am the strongest candidate for that, to step into that role. For chapter 8, what stood out the most to me was the quote, don't let ego get in the way of making the best decision. And I feel like that has been an important part that I needed to learn in my journey to be a leader. Because there have been moments, especially when I was a lead, and I've mentioned it before, where how I did things at the beginning of my lead role, I felt it was my way or the wrong way, essentially. That's how I thought of it when I was first a lead. Once I became like a seasoned lead, then I started realizing, no, there's many different perspectives, and there's many different roads to a solution. And I learned the hard way, and unfortunately I had a lot of support from other leads that helped me realize there are many right ways to get to a solution. Mine isn't technically the wrong way, but it's not the only way. So, him mentioning how important it is to give respect and not let your own ego get in the way, goes a long way. And obviously look where, he's gotten himself with that thought process.
Yeah, I love what you said about testing the temperament. I never really thought about it that way, but that's probably part of it. Just can you withstand or even do 15 interviews? I don't think I would have made it. I don't know about you. Thank you so much. Okay, Lauren. We still have her? Yes, we do.
Hey everyone. Yeah, I finally got the mute button off. Sorry I missed last week. I was at an appointment, but yeah, like what everyone said, it's been really awesome, and that was kind of like a lot of the things I wanted to touch on. But the quote and the part that really stood out to me from at least from chapter 7 was, "It's easy to be optimistic when everyone is telling you you are great. It's much harder and much more necessary when your sense of yourself is being challenged." And then further down, he says, "I could control what I did and how I comported myself. Everything else was beyond my control." And this is something that I really take to heart. I remember during high school, I had this like mentor. He was my hitting coach, but he always talked about maintaining a sense of composure, and he kind of compared it to being like a hunting tiger, more specifically because that had to do with me, like a female tiger, about how when they are on the prowl, they are so even-tempered and silent that it looks like, and they're just so regal, and they can be so incredibly powerful without having to make a huge scene. And I think this is really important because you can be empathetic and show emotion, but also maintain the same amount of composure as when the stakes are low and when the stakes are high. And you can be more rational during the entire thought process without being crazy. I mean, I've had my moments of facing anxiety or getting high-tempered, but trying to maintain that composure and not like necessarily like blowing up in someone's face. I think you gain a lot of respect that way by showing that you can be rational. And that doesn't mean that you can't show empathy or be emotional, but it just, I think it helps maintain your credibility in some way. So it just really helped me remember, like, one of the most important things in my life is like focusing on things that are positive, but also maintaining that sense of grace and excellence without having to be all out there. That's kind of the biggest thing I took away.
I like that tiger metaphor that he gave you. That's good. That's a really interesting one. So Teresa, I have you last. Everybody talked about lots of ego and lots of respect. What did you take away from it?
First off, can I tell you how much I love book club? You guys always center me for my week. I love it. So for me, it was the entire book is spectacular, but in chapter 8, right at the very beginning, he was talking about how when he became CEO, and he says, "Skeptics who still saw me as a temporary CEO, a short-term patch until the board could identify a star from the outside. Curiosity was high, expectations were low. And I quickly realized that I needed to define our direction and get some key things done before my tenure officially began." And that was during the 6-month period where he was named CEO, but Michael was still in the role. And one thing that has come out of this furlough, a positive thing, is when I'm at work, my days go by super fast. Life goes by fast. And on furlough, like, my days seem super long, and it's given me a lot of time just for reflection and to think about, am I happy with my life? And if I had choices, would I make different, if I could, would I make different choices? And it reminds me kind of like my whole journey as a leader. When I was a GSM, which is stage manager in Emporium, I had the opportunity to become area manager of Adventure Frontier. And it was a small complex, small volume. And I realized my leaders were, this was my test. Could I do it? And it turned out to be a great ride. I was following an area manager who preferred a different line of business. So I had to go in and learn, about the people. We keep talking about the relationships and how critical that is. And I had to learn how the complex ran. I had to learn what people, each lead, each manager's expectations and challenges were, where the business was. I had to, create results pretty fast. But whenever you go into a new area in a leadership position, the last thing you want to do is just go in like a bulldozer and make a bunch of changes. It's really important to understand how the complex is running and get all the information you can from the folks that you work with, right? Because they're the ones who have been in there. So, it took a little while to kind of learn how the complex was moving along, but we did great. We did well, and it gave me the opportunity to kind of show that that we could do it as a team. So then had the opportunity to go to Emporium afterwards, and Terry Campanelli was our ops manager at the time. And I remember I was getting my new iPhone, and I was walking from the Grand California to Paradise Pier, and I was on the street, and I get a call from Terry, and Terry's like, "Don't move, we're coming to pick you up." So she and Veronica Horton, who was my ops manager for Adventure Frontier, came and picked me up with the putt-putt over at the Grand Hotel, and I had no idea what was happening. I was being kidnapped. So we get back to the Emporium office, and they offered me Emporium, and I thought, holy crap, it just went from like a $26 million a year complex to a $64 million a year complex, and a cast base of about 140 casts. Emporium had over 700 casts. And the other thing was that in Emporium, Richard Stoner was the area manager at the time, and he was being promoted to ops manager of West Side Attractions. And Richard was fantastic and still is, and he's a good friend of mine. And I remember for the first 3 weeks, I was just uncomfortable sitting in his office because I felt like, why in the world am I here? But they took a leap of faith on me, and coming in, I had to do the same thing, just learn about the different leaders that were there, learn how the place worked, but immediately form a plan in my own mind and give my leaders what my expectations were. And in general, for any area you go to, your expectations are the same because you're a leader for a result. It's just how you get to drive the business there is a little bit different depending on the area. But I remember it was different because the team was super healthy, super bonded, because Richard was an excellent area manager. And it wasn't like I was having a difficult time with it, or it was challenging, but it wasn't bad challenging. It was just different. So I've been reflecting on how those different opportunities have been. And 100% of the time it's about the relationships, because I knew Richard, I knew Terry, I knew Veronica, I knew I had sources that I could go to when I had questions or needed guidance. And when you get into those positions, they don't expect you to know everything. The whole point of going into new positions is to learn new things. So just to be open about it and being humble. And it's tough. It's frightening, especially when you go to places that are really high visibility. And I was thinking that, and sorry, I know this is long-winded, but I miss you guys. I don't get to talk to you very often. Coming back now, I think every single day that we're on a new path now when we get back, and you guys are severely important to me. And I think about it every day, how we're gonna be able just to go to work, and what that first week is gonna be like, and just making sure that our guests are comfortable, but more importantly for me is making sure that you guys are comfortable, because each one of you is going to have a different experience. And where I feel like all of you, as soon as we get that phone call, are going to be ready to go back and be there for each other and our guests. I know that there's going to be different times throughout the day in which you're probably going to feel anxious, and your cast are going to feel anxious, and it's going to be high emotion. So just in my brain, again, just trying to think about each one of you and how we can best take care of each other as we get through it, and that trust level. That first day when we had to pull you in the lead office and tell you that we were closing, it took a lot of trust for you guys to know, okay, we're going to get through this day together. I just want you guys to know that, each one of us are there for each other. I don't think there's one person on this team that I don't feel like I could take it to the office and just have a meltdown. So, anyhow, this book has brought out a lot of emotions for me, especially this chapter. So I'm done. Sorry.
Teresa, never apologize for talking. You have words that just amaze me. So
Here, here. It's very important,
Anyhow.
Teresa, that you understand that we're all here because of your leadership, and we all
Well.
work together as a team to get through this. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll get through it.
I
We
want to
will
be
get
there
through
when
it.
we reopen, though.
Seriously, I want everybody to work.
Everybody
Forget
has
the
to
cast, just have all the leads come.
Yep.
Exactly.
Let's knock it
Yeah.
out and try it and play. It'll be a big old party.
Yeah, it will. Yeah, it will. And we'll get through it. We'll get through it. It's just Bob's journey has been quite remarkable. I mean, the level, he's just used to handling such big issues every day. It's kind of like the president's role, not our president currently, but in general, the president's role is by the time anything gets to his desk, it's already like critical, right? He doesn't get the easy stuff on his desk. And it's very much like Bob's life. Everything he's had, he's critical. And then bless his heart, he's not getting a paycheck right now. But again, he's leading Parks and Resorts to reopen. So it shows a lot about his character. And, for me, while my job is absolutely not the most important thing in my life, it is part of who I am. I don't distinguish personal life and work life. It just is my life. And I feel like, I'm my best self when I'm at the park. So it's important to me that, I'm there for you guys. And then you guys know if I'm ever screwing up, you can tell me.
Yeah. I got to tell you, Teresa, reading the book and reading a lot of his leadership style, I see a lot of that in you.
Oh, you're sweet.
Yeah.
Say that.
You lead without ego. It's not about what's going to make you look good. It's about what's going to be successful for all of us as the whole.
Oh,
And you are that
you're
leader.
sweet.
And in my 23 years, and I think Ted can say the same thing, we've all had multiple leaders. And there's some that you just sit there and go, okay. And then there's others you really rally behind. And you are somebody that I would follow anytime,
You're
anywhere.
sweet. I follow you too. And thank you. Whew.
Yep. Hey, at least we didn't have to go through 15 interviews for our jobs.
Hallelujah. Usually at our job, they just you get a golf cart picking you up. Oh, you have a new job. You don't even interview for it.
Right. I think it points out the importance of his job versus ours. But I do think that's
you guys have had. I've only ever had one interview, so I don't know.
But just imagine these 15 interviews. If you think about it, Bob's probably one of the best leaders we've had for the company. If you think about all the things that he foresaw, look at, if he didn't buy that whole streaming, that's what probably is helping out the company the most now, because everyone and their mother is watching this now. Who would have known? And even when he bought Pixar and even when he bought Marvel, I just thought, oh my God, he's lost his mind. What's he doing? He's forgetting about the Disney, legacy. But he had that amazing foresight on, and it's just amazing. And the other part is that, when we read the other chapters and how he always insists, he doesn't really, he uses his heart when he called those parents when they lost a child, and legal's telling them, no, don't call, but he did it anyway. And, how he went to Roy and, he went to Steve Jobs. Those are all things that we learn every day from our jobs. We learn them from our leaders. And we just continue to build those relationships. But that's what's so fun about reading this book. So this is just great.
It's also,
go ahead.
The level of respect that he shows everyone.
Yes.
It's true. But I think
about how much disrespect